Hannah and Mike here with Delta. If you're planning a bathroom renovation or doing new construction even, a new tub and wall set can make all the difference. And it's a project we can help you tackle.
Now today we're going to start by installing a Hycroft bathtub. So if you have this model, stay tuned. We're going to walk you through the project step by step. Now if you're also planning on continuing the project by adding a surround, Delta also offers a coordinating Hycroft wall set, and we've got a video for that too, so be sure to check that one out.
Yeah, no matter what stage of the project you're on, we've got you covered. This project is probably one of the more difficult ones we do, and it does take a little bit of time to get through. Depending on your situation, we may have some suggestions for framing and plumbing along the way.
Now, keep in mind, building codes are different everywhere, so if there's a task that seems a little bit beyond your abilities, we definitely recommend contracting a professional for some help. Now, you also want to make sure that you're totally comfortable with all these steps, so maybe do a quick review of the install video before fully diving in.
But if you're ready, we're ready. So let's get started.
Before we fully jump in, we just want to take a moment to point out a few things that will be helpful to know before we start the installation.
First, don't trash your tub packaging too soon. There's a template on the side of the box. Use a utility knife to cut that out. It'll be good to have later when we're working in the tub and we want to protect the tub surface.
Now second, you should know that this installation can be done by one person, but we do recommend having an extra set of hands on standby at least. Some pieces are bulky and there are some steps where having someone check your alignment will be helpful, so we're going to tackle this one together.
Third, we're going to be checking that our floors are level and that our walls are plumb and square pretty often throughout this installation. Making sure everything is lined up is important. To check that a surface is level, I'll place the level flat and look for the bubble to be in the centermost part of the lines. I'm sure you've done this before, but just to be sure that we're all on the same page.
You'll also need to check to make sure your walls are plumb. Now the same thing, I'm going to use the level vertically for that. This time the bubble needs to be centered vertically. Finally, to check that the walls are square, and again, this is important, I'm going to use a carpenter square and place it in the corner where the two walls intersect. If everything is square, the walls will touch the carpenter square flush and evenly along both edges.
Okay, enough vocab. One last thing, you should know that there are some steps along the way where you're going to need to allow curing time for adhesive or sealants before moving to the next step.
Now using them properly is important, so don't rush through these sections. Be sure to allow ample time for curing completely.
Okay, there's a handful of tools that you'll need, so be sure you have all the tools listed on screen here or in your instructions. You're also going to need some lumber for the additional wall studs if you're installing a wall set as well, and you're going to need a drain and overflow assembly that will fit a 16.5-inch deep bathtub.
And now be sure that the tub has the drain on the correct side so that it matches where your drain is in the floor. Now for our installation here, the drain is on the right side, but if yours is on the left, no worries because the process is exactly the same.
Okay, let's get started with this installation and begin by checking a few things to ensure your space is going to work for your tub install. Okay, now we're going to check this space to ensure that our tub will fit properly in it. Now, first we're going to take a couple of measurements. Our tub is 60 inches by 30 inches, so I'm going to use my tape measure here. Make sure that we have that. I'm going to go down to the bottom here. Make sure I have 60. Yep. All right, now we're going to move up to about where the top of the tub would be, just to make sure we have 60 there too. We do. All right, now I'm going to measure the depth to make sure we have 30. We do, okay.
Okay, great. So next we're going to check to make sure that our walls are square. Now to do this, I'm going to use my carpenter square. I'm going to place the back corner and the back corners of my rough opening here, and I'm going to check to make sure my bottom plates are contacting along each edge of my square. I'm going to place it one side here first. That side looks pretty good. Then again over on the other side. And that looks pretty good as well. Now, if yours is a little bit off, no worries. You can usually correct this by using some shims at a later step, or if you need to now, you can also use some furring strips.
Okay, now I'm going to take our level and make sure that our walls are plumb. I'm just going to hold it vertically on here. Check to make sure that the bubble is in the centermost part. That looks good. I'm going to go around to each stud and check those. Okay, those look good. Now that I have the level still, I'm just going to come down to the subfloor. Make sure that this is level as well.
Okay, now this is extremely important that we have this space level because we want to make sure we're working off a level surface. If it's not leveled, it could lead to some gapping issues underneath your tub, which could lead to some stability issues, and we absolutely don't want that. So if you need to level this up, you can use a leveling compound or even a mortar bed, and we probably recommend consulting a professional in this case. Either way, you want to make sure that you have given it enough time to cure and dry completely before moving on to the next steps.
Ultimately, you just want to ensure that the entire bottom support of the tub is touching a level surface. Our subfloor is level, so we are ready to move on.
All right, so our next step is to attach our apron support to the bottom of our tub. Now to do this, we have to flip the tub upside down. So we recommend putting down a blanket or a towel or a piece of carpet or something just to protect the finish of the tub and also the floor while we're working on it.
Now, depending on what model tub you have, you'll either need to attach the apron support to the inner or outer post. Check your model number and refer to this guide on screen. For our model, we're going to use the inner post. Simply slide the apron support onto the post located on the bottom support and push it until snug.
With that pushed down on there, next we're going to run a thin bead of adhesive right along the edge of the support here. And we don't need to overdo this, just need a good consistent bead, the length of the support. Perfect. Now when I push this apron back against the support, I want to make sure the edge of the black support is sitting below the edge of the white apron. Once I've got that nice and centered, I like to use a little bit of painter's tape just to hold everything in place while things are drying up.
Okay, now we're gonna let this cure according to the adhesive manufacturer's instructions. Once it's cured, we'll be ready to move on. Okay, now it's time to dry fit our tub into our pocket. Just gonna pick it up, guide it in there. Wanna make sure it's tight up against this back wall. That looks good. Okay, now this is where that template comes into play. I'm gonna grab this, put it down to protect our tub surface because Mike is about to jump in and check for level and square. So he's got his level here, so he's gonna put it on top of the back flange and check for level.
That looks perfect.
Now he's gonna put it on the top of the side flange.
That one's pretty good too.
And then the last side.
All right, everything's looking perfect. Next, I want to check for square. Again, I'm going to use my carpenter square like I did before, but this time I'm going to check to the top flange of the tub, making sure my carpenter square is contacting that flange fully, and then my vertical stud here. That side looks perfect. That side's good as well. Move to my last corner over here. That's good. And that's good too. All right, looks like we're all level and square. We're ready to move on to the next step where we mark our pilot holes. All right, so now I'm gonna mark my pilot holes on each stud location around the flange along the top of the tub here. And to do that, I've got my pencil. I'm gonna make a small dot in the middle of each stud from side to side. I also wanna make sure it's in the middle from the top of the tub deck to the top of the flange. You don't have to measure this, you should be able to eyeball it. Just give yourself a little reference point at each stud location. In the corners, you can give yourself a little bit of room if you have a double stud on the edge. All right, and as we come to the front here, I don't want to make a mark in this top flange towards the edge here because I could crack this since it's a little bit shorter than the others. So I'm going to come down to my side flanges. I'm going to make two marks. One towards the top, and I like to come down about a third or so. Again, getting it in the center of the flange this time. And then my second mark coming up from the floor about a third. And again, right in the center of the side flange. Okay, perfect, that looks great. I'm gonna do the same steps for the other side, and then we'll be ready to pull it out and drill our pilot holes. So our next step is to drill our pilot holes that we just marked around our flange here. Now you'll notice I pulled the tub totally out of the opening, and this is because I don't want to drill into any studs or water lines or electrical, so this avoids any potential for that. Also, you'll notice I've put an extended drill bit on my drill here, and that's to avoid any damage that I could cause to the tub, especially when drilling in those corners. Now the size of my drill bit I have is a 3/16 inch drill bit, and I'm just going to start moving around to each one of my marked locations and drill the hole all the way through. All right. That wraps up the drilling of our pilot holes. So the next step is going to be to install our drain assembly. Now I'm not going to show you how to do that here because we have another video for that, so be sure to check that out. One note I do want to point out is not to use plumber's putty on your drain assembly for sealant. Make sure you use an acrylic or latex caulk to be sure that you're not going to damage the tub itself. Once we get everything installed, we're going to push it right back into our pocket and secure it up to the walls. So here we are back in the tub, and we're ready to start securing our tub to our stud wall. Now before we do this, we're going to be dealing with some screws, and I want to make sure that none of them fall down the drain, so I find it's helpful to put a rag over the drain just in case we do drop one while we're working through the step. Next I want to talk about the screws. The screws you want to use are going to be 1.25 inches long, and they're going to be pan or round head. Now this is important because the pan or round head screws are flat on the bottom of the head here. If you had a flat head screw, the top would be flat and there'd be kind of a bevel coming down to the thread of the screw itself. That bevel could cause some damage to the tub as you're securing it to the wall. So again, don't use flathead screws, make sure you're using pan or round head screws. Here I've got my drill, and again, you'll notice that I've got my extended drill bit on here. That gives me a little bit more clearance when I'm drilling these in to make sure that I'm not going to damage the edge of the tub. Now, what I'm going to watch for as I'm drilling these around these holes is if I have any gap between the flange and the stud itself. Here I'm going to start in the corner. You'll notice that I've got a nice tight fit, so I'm going to go ahead and screw that in. Now, as I screw these in, I don't want to over tighten these. I just need them a little bit snug because again, over tightening could cause damage to that flange. I'm going to continue moving around. Again, I've got a nice tight fit here, so no shim necessary. All right, perfect. Now this next one, I've got a little bit of a gap between the flange and the tub itself. Anything over about 1/8 of an inch, I'm going to want to put a shim behind to make sure I'm not, again, putting any undue stress on that flange of the tub. So I've got my shim here. I'm just going to kind of gently fit it down between the flange and the stud, and I don't have to force this at all. I just need to, just enough that it gives a snug fit and gives me something to drill through. One thing I find helpful with these shims too is as I screw, I'm going to make sure I hold it with one hand. Perfect. With that in place, I can use my utility knife, get a couple scores across the top, break it off nice and clean. Moving on, again, my next one, again, needs a shim. Grab another shim. Again, not forcing it down, just kind of letting it set in place. Grab another screw, hold the shim in place. Just snug that up like so. All right, perfect. Now that I've reached the front, I want to talk about this front apron just for a second here. Now, if you remember, the front of the apron, we put that apron support behind in the center here, so this is going to be nice and straight for us. On the edges, however, it's going to have a little bit of play to it. Now, it's really important that we get the front of the apron as straight across as possible. So one thing I like to do is take my level here, and I lay it tight against the edge of my tub, making sure I'm contacting the front here of the apron. And I get my screw ready on the edge. And I want to use one hand to pull this apron out to such a spot that I get a nice straight contact along the whole length of my straight edge here. So again, I'll get my screw gun ready with the screw, pull my apron out until I'm right nice and tight against it, and then secure that right in place. Again, making sure I'm not over tightening these. All right, that looks perfect. Now I'm going to continue doing the same steps for the other side of the tub, and that about wraps this thing up. All right, everything looks great here. So to finish the space, you'll want to add a wall surround kit or enclosure materials of your choice.
If you need help with the wall set, check out the next video in this series. If you are only installing the tub here, then I hope you love it. And as always, if you need more help, be sure to reach out to Delta's customer service team.